My world collapsed last night in the most humiliating and surreal way imaginable. I'm a 36-year-old man, and I'm typing this with shaky hands because I need to get it all out. Let me take you back to where it all began. My wife, Laura, and I had been married for 12 years. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect couple, a modest home, decent jobs, and a comfortable life. But in the last few months, I started to notice cracks in the facade. Laura became cold, distant. She started dressing differently, putting more effort into her appearance, though never for me. I'd joke about her sudden fashion transformation, and she'd laugh it off, but the joke started to sting when I realized I wasn't the one benefiting from her newfound attention to detail. Last night was the breaking point. Laura told me she was meeting some girlfriends for a casual dinner. She had this fake, overly cheerful tone that immediately set off alarm bells. I wanted to believe her, but something in me snapped. Instead of sitting at home like the trusting fool I'd been for months, I decided to follow her. She left around 7:30 p.m., dressed in a black dress that hugged her curves in a way that was impossible to ignore. It was a dress I hadn't seen before. My heart felt heavy as I got into my car and trailed her, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't suspect anything. I told myself I was being paranoid, but my gut screamed otherwise. Laura pulled into the parking lot of an upscale steakhouse downtown. This wasn't some dive bar or casual diner. This was the kind of place reserved for special occasions. My stomach churned as I watched her step out of the car and walk inside, her heels clicking against the pavement with a confidence that made me feel invisible. I parked a few spots away, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. What was I doing? Was I really about to spy on my wife like some desperate idiot? But before I could talk myself out of it, I saw him. A tall man in his mid-40s, sharp suit, slicked back hair. The type who looked like he belonged in some glossy magazine. He walked up to Laura, and she greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. My heart sank. This wasn't a girlfriend dinner. This was a date. I sat there in my car, stunned. My mind raced through every possible explanation, but nothing made sense. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and most of all, angry, not just at her, but at myself for ignoring all the signs. I don't know what came over me, but I got out of the car and walked into the restaurant. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I couldn't sit there and watch her lie to my face any longer. The hostess smiled and asked if I had a reservation. I mumbled something about meeting someone and scanned the room. There they were, tucked away in a corner booth, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. That's when the idea hit me. I spotted our waiter, a young guy who looked nervous and eager to please. I waved him over, slipped off my wedding ring, and handed it to him. "See that woman at the corner booth?" I asked. He nodded. "Take this to her. Tell her it's from her husband." The waiter hesitated, probably thinking I was some lunatic, but I guess my expression convinced him. He nodded and walked toward their table, my wedding ring clenched in his hand. I moved to a spot near the bar, far enough to stay out of sight, but close enough to watch the scene unfold. The waiter approached their table and placed the ring in front of Laura. He said something to her. I couldn't hear what, but her face immediately went pale. She stared at the ring like it was a snake about to bite her. The man across from her looked confused, leaning in to ask what was going on. Laura shook her head, her hands trembling as she picked up the ring. And then, to my utter disbelief, she smiled. Not a nervous smile, or a guilty one, but a smug, defiant smile that made my blood boil. She leaned over and whispered something to her lover, and they both started laughing, not loud, but enough for me to see the mockery on their faces. It felt like they were laughing at me, like I was some pathetic joke to them. I stumbled out of the restaurant, my head spinning. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade, had not only betrayed me, but had the audacity to mock me when confronted. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I sat in my car outside the restaurant for what felt like hours, trying to process what had just happened. My wife, my Laura, wasn't just cheating on me. She was mocking me for finding out. The smugness on her face and that laugh felt like daggers aimed straight at my soul. I couldn't let it stand. I drove home, my mind racing with every possibility. Should I confront her the second she walked through the door? Should I pack her bags and throw them onto the lawn? Should I call every one of our friends and tell them what she had done? But no, something inside me told me to wait, to think this through. If she wanted to play dirty, then so would I. When she came home that night, It was almost midnight. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to read a book. She walked in like nothing had happened, her face lit up in fake cheerfulness. "How was dinner?" I asked casually, not looking up from the book. She froze for a split second before replying, "Oh, it was nice, just a low-key night with the girls." The audacity. She didn't even flinch as she lied to my face. "That's good," I said, forcing a smile. "You deserve a night out." She kissed me on the cheek and said she was heading to bed. I watched her walk up the stairs, and a wave of nausea hit me. How many times had she lied like that before? How many nights had I believed her without question? The next morning, I decided to dig deeper. If she was going to treat me like a fool, I needed to know just how deep this betrayal went. I waited until she left for work, then grabbed her laptop. We rarely used each other's devices, so she never bothered to log out of her accounts. What I found made my stomach turn. Her email was a treasure trove of secrets. Flights booked to cities I'd never heard her mention, hotel reservations under fake names. And then there were the photos, selfies of her and the man from the restaurant, arms wrapped around each other, grinning like they didn't have a care in the world. One picture in particular caught my eye. The two of them lounging on a bed, champagne glasses in hand, time-stamped the same weekend she told me she was visiting her sister. But the worst part wasn't the photos or the emails. It was the messages. She had a secret email account linked to her phone, and the messages between her and her lover, whose name I learned was Mark, were graphic and cruel. They didn't just talk about their relationship, they talked about me. "I feel bad for him," Mark wrote in one email. "He seems so clueless." "Don't," Laura replied. "He's pathetic. He'll never figure it out. And even if he does, what's he going to do about it?" Pathetic. That word felt like a slap in the face. Was that really how she saw me? Was I just some weak, spineless man in her eyes? But I wasn't weak, not anymore. That evening, I started to plan. If she wanted to treat me like a fool, I'd show her just how wrong she was. I didn't want revenge, at least not in the traditional sense. I wanted justice. I wanted her to see exactly what she had done and who she had become. The next few days were a blur. I reached out to a lawyer, gathered evidence, and started making arrangements. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She'd made her choices, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. And then I set the stage for the final act. I called the restaurant where she and Mark had their little rendezvous and spoke to the manager. I told him I wanted to arrange a surprise dinner for my wife. I even booked the same table they'd sat at, just to twist the knife a little deeper. On the night of the dinner, I handed her an envelope before we left. "What's this?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "Just something special for you to open later," I said with a smile. She looked suspicious, but didn't push it. We arrived at the restaurant, and I could tell she was on edge. She kept glancing around, like she was expecting someone to jump out and yell, "Gotcha." We sat at the table, and I made small talk while she picked at her food. She seemed distracted, her phone buzzing every few minutes with messages I could only assume were from Mark. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. I signaled the waiter, the same young man who had delivered the ring to her last time. He walked over with the envelope I'd given her earlier, placed it in front of her, and said, "This is from your husband." Her face went pale as she opened it. Inside were copies of the photos, the email exchanges, and a detailed list of all the evidence I had gathered. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her eyes widening with every word. What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned in, my voice calm but firm. "This is the life you've been living behind my back. Consider it a parting gift." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She looked around the restaurant, clearly aware that people were starting to stare. You can't do this," she hissed. "Not here." "Oh, I think I just did," I said, standing up. I walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting there, her lies exposed for everyone to see. I felt something I hadn't felt in months, freedom. But little did I know, this wasn't the end of the nightmare. It was only the beginning. I barely slept that night. While Laura was still at the restaurant, likely scrambling to figure out her next move, I sat in the silence of our home, surrounded by the ghost of what once was. It was both liberating and terrifying. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control, yet the uncertainty of what lay ahead kept gnawing at me. Around midnight, Laura stormed through the front door. Her face was a mix of fury and humiliation. She slammed her purse onto the counter and marched straight to me, where I sat on the couch. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. I didn't flinch. It was the truth, something you've been avoiding for a long time. Her eyes narrowed. You had no right to embarrass me like that. I let out a bitter laugh. Embarrass you? Are you serious right now? You've been sneaking around with another man, lying to my face, and mocking me behind my back. But sure, let's talk about your embarrassment. She crossed her arms, her face twisting into a scowl. You could have just talked to me, you know, instead of whatever that was. Talk to you, I repeated, my voice rising. When? Between your secret dates with Mark? Or maybe during one of those girls' nights you lied about? She looked away, her jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, but instead, she said, You're blowing this out of proportion. It wasn't even serious. My heart sank. Not serious, Laura. You've been cheating on me for months. You've lied to me, mocked me, and treated our marriage like it meant nothing. How is that not serious? She rolled her eyes, and that's when I realized she didn't care. Not really. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. I think you should leave, I said, my voice cold and steady. Her eyes widened. What? You heard me. Pack a bag and go. I can't do this anymore. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me like I'd grown two heads. Then, with a dramatic sigh, she turned and marched upstairs. I could hear her muttering under her breath, but I didn't care. I was done. An hour later, she came back down with a suitcase in hand. This isn't over, she said, glaring at me. Oh, I'm counting on it, I replied. She slammed the door on her way out, leaving me alone in the house that suddenly felt much larger than it ever had before. But the peace didn't last long. The next day, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, even emails. Laura wasn't just angry. She was out for revenge, and as I soon found out, she wasn't afraid to play dirty. The morning after Laura left, I woke up to chaos. My phone was flooded with messages, not just from her, but from mutual friends and family members. She had wasted no time spinning her version of the story. Why did you humiliate her like that? One friend texted. I can't believe you kicked her out, another message read. She was painting herself as the victim, claiming I had overreacted and blown a minor issue out of proportion. Minor issue? Cheating on me for months wasn't exactly a minor issue. I wanted to scream at everyone who bought into her lies, but I kept my responses short. I wasn't about to stoop to her level. By mid-morning, the texts took a darker turn. Laura started messaging me directly, spewing venom I never thought she was capable of. You've ruined my life, you know that? One message read. Don't think you're going to come out of this looking like the good guy, another said. It wasn't long before she moved beyond words. By the afternoon, my social media accounts were full of cryptic posts she had written, clearly aimed at me. Some people can't handle a strong, independent woman, one post read. Another, when a marriage ends, it's rarely one person's fault. Remember that. I tried to brush it off, but when she started tagging my friends and family in her posts, I couldn't stay silent any longer. I called her. She didn't even let me get a word in before launching into a tirade. What do you want? She snapped. Haven't you done enough damage? You're unbelievable, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. You cheat on me, lie to me, mock me, and now you're trying to make me the bad guy. What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? She shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe if you'd been a better husband, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Don't you dare blame this on me, I said, my voice trembling with anger. I gave you everything, Laura. I supported you, trusted you, and this is how you repay me? She scoffed. Oh, please, spare me the victim act. You've been a boring, predictable doormat for years. Mark actually makes me feel alive, something you haven't done in a long time. I was stunned into silence. It wasn't just her words. It was the venom behind them, the sheer lack of remorse. How had I not seen this side of her before? The call ended with her laughing bitterly and saying, You'll regret this, trust me. And she wasn't kidding. That evening, I got a call from my boss. Apparently, Laura had called my workplace, claiming I had been emotionally abusive and that she was concerned for my mental health. Thankfully, my boss knew me well enough to see through her lies, but the fact that she had gone to such lengths shook me. This wasn't about our marriage anymore. This was about her trying to destroy me, piece by piece. But I wasn't going to let her win. If she wanted a war, then I'd give her one. Laura's escalation forced me to take action. I'd hoped to handle the divorce quietly, but she made that impossible. Her smear campaign was relentless, and it wasn't just affecting me. It was affecting my relationships, my reputation, and even my job. She was trying to tear down everything I'd built, and I wasn't going to sit back and let it happen. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, Mr. Henson. I told him everything about the cheating, the texts, the social media posts, even the stunt she pulled with my boss. He listened patiently, then told me what I needed to hear. Get organized. Gather every piece of evidence you have. If she wants to play dirty, we'll make sure the truth is on your side. So that's what I did. I spent hours compiling everything. The emails, the photos, the messages where she openly mocked me with Mark. I even went back through our joint bank account and found suspicious charges, hotel stays, expensive dinners, and even jewelry I'd never seen her wear. It all painted a clear picture of what she'd been up to. While I was building my case, Laura continued her antics. She started showing up unannounced, pounding on the door and demanding to talk. The first time, I opened the door, hoping she might finally have something honest to say. Instead, she screamed at me, accusing me of ruining her life. "You're making me look like the bad guy," she yelled, tears streaming down her face. "You are the bad guy, Laura," I replied coldly. "You cheated, you lied, and now you're trying to destroy me because you got caught. Take some responsibility for once in your life." She didn't like that answer. She stormed off, shouting over her shoulder, "You'll regret this." After that, I stopped answering the door when she showed up. She started leaving voicemails instead, long, rambling messages where she alternated between begging me to take her back and threatening to expose me for things I hadn't even done. But the breaking point came a few days later. I was scrolling through social media when I saw that she had posted a picture of me, along with a long caption accusing me of being emotionally unstable and controlling. The comments were full of sympathy for her and disgust for me. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but my lawyer had warned me against engaging online. "Let her dig her own grave," he'd said. "The more she lashes out, the better it looks for you in court." It was good advice, but it was hard to follow. Seeing people I cared about believe her lies felt like a knife to the chest. Then something unexpected happened. One of Laura's friends, a woman named Megan, reached out to me privately. Megan and I had always gotten along, but we hadn't spoken much outside of group settings. Her message was short but surprising. "I think you deserve to know the truth." I replied immediately, asking what she meant. She told me that she'd been friends with Laura for years, but she couldn't stand by and watch her destroy me. She confirmed everything I already knew: Laura's affair with Mark, her lies, her manipulative behavior. But she also told me something I didn't expect. "She's been talking about how she's going to take everything from you in the divorce," Megan wrote. "She's bragging about how you'll be left with nothing while she and Mark start fresh." It felt like a punch to the gut, but it also lit a fire in me. This wasn't just about getting justice anymore. It was about protecting myself from a woman who had no limits to her cruelty. With Megan's help, I gathered even more evidence. Texts she'd shared with Laura, screenshots of group chats where Laura openly mocked me, and even a recording Megan had made of Laura bragging about her plans. By the time I was done, I had a mountain of evidence that painted a clear picture. Laura wasn't a victim. She was a liar, a manipulator, and a bully. The next step was court, and I was ready. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. I sat in the lobby, clutching a folder stuffed with every piece of evidence I'd painstakingly gathered. My lawyer, Mr. Henson, was calm and confident, a steady presence amid the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Laura arrived moments later, strutting in like she owned the place. She was dressed to the nines, her expression cold and unbothered. Behind her trailed Mark, his smug grin making my blood boil. It was as if this was some kind of game to them, but I knew better. This wasn't just about exposing the truth, it was about reclaiming my dignity. The courtroom itself was sterile and quiet, but the tension between us was palpable. Laura's lawyer opened the proceedings with the same narrative she'd been spinning for weeks. I was an unstable, controlling husband who couldn't handle the end of our marriage. They claimed that her relationship with Mark began after our separation, that I had emotionally neglected her, and that I was using the divorce to punish her. I sat there, biting my tongue, letting them spew their lies. Mr. Henson had warned me not to react, and I trusted his strategy. When it was our turn, he calmly stood, adjusted his tie, and began dismantling their story piece by piece. First, he presented the emails and text messages I'd found. Irrefutable proof that the affair had been going on for months while we were still very much together. The photos, the hotel receipts, and even the charges on our joint credit card told a story Laura couldn't deny. The courtroom grew quieter as he played the audio recording Megan had provided. In it, Laura could be heard laughing as she told her friends how she planned to take me for everything I had. "He's too weak to fight back." The recording echoed in the courtroom, Laura's voice unmistakable. "By the time I'm done, he'll be begging for scraps." I glanced at Laura for the first time. Her confidence wavered, her face flushed, and she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mark, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. But the most damning evidence came last. Mr. Henson handed the judge a printout of Laura's social media posts, highlighting the ones where she had openly defamed me. He explained how these posts had not only damaged my reputation, but also proved her intent to manipulate public perception in her favor. When Laura's lawyer tried to object, the judge silenced him with a sharp look. "The evidence speaks for itself," he said firmly. By the time Mr. Henson finished, the courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Laura sat frozen, her once smug expression replaced by one of quiet panic. The judge didn't waste time. He ruled in my favor, granting me a significant portion of our assets and dismissing Laura's claim for spousal support. He also issued a stern warning about her behavior, making it clear that any further attempts to defame me would have legal consequences. As the gavel fell, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the financial victory. It was about finally being heard, about proving that I wasn't the villain in this story. Laura stormed out of the courtroom without a word, Mark trailing after her. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. This wasn't how I imagined our marriage ending. But then I reminded myself of everything she'd done, and the sadness was replaced by a quiet sense of relief. But even as I walked out of the courthouse, I knew this wasn't truly over. Laura wasn't the type to let things go quietly, and I had a feeling she had one last card to play. I thought the courtroom victory would be the end of Laura's games, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Just days after the ruling, I started noticing strange things. My car was keyed in the driveway. Anonymous letters showed up in my mailbox, accusing me of being a cheater and a fraud. My boss even called me into his office to inform me that someone had sent an email to HR, claiming I had been engaging in inappropriate behavior at work. It was clear who was behind this. Laura was desperate, clawing for any way to drag me down with her. She couldn't handle the fact that her lies had been exposed, that her attempt to destroy me had failed. But instead of confronting her directly, I decided to fight smarter. I installed cameras around my property. I documented every strange incident, every threatening letter, and every baseless accusation. I also reached out to Megan, who confirmed that Laura had been venting to their mutual friends about her next plan to make my life miserable. "She's spiraling," Megan told me. "She doesn't know what to do now that she's lost control. Just be careful." The breaking point came one Friday night. I was sitting in my living room, trying to unwind after a long week, when I heard a loud crash outside. I ran to the window and saw Laura standing in my driveway, holding a baseball bat. My car's windshield was shattered, and she was mid-swing, aiming for one of the side mirrors. "Are you insane?" I yelled as I threw open the front door. She turned to me, her face twisted in fury. "You ruined my life," she screamed. "You think you're going to walk away from this without paying for it?" I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Keep going, Laura. Let's make sure everyone sees who you really are." That seemed to snap her out of whatever frenzy she was in. She dropped the bat and backed away, her expression shifting from rage to panic. "You wouldn't," she said, her voice trembling. "Wouldn't I?" I replied coldly. She fled before the police arrived, but the damage was done, both to my car and to any shred of credibility she had left. With the video evidence in hand, I filed a restraining order against her the next morning. The court granted it almost immediately, citing her erratic behavior and the history of harassment. She was ordered to stay away from me, my property, and my workplace. It felt like another small victory, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she still had one last move up her sleeve. And I was right. A week later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of me at a bar, sitting next to a female coworker. The caption read, "Does your boss know about this?" I froze. The photo was innocent, just two colleagues grabbing a drink after work, but in Laura's hands, It was a weapon. She had been following me, waiting for any opportunity to twist the narrative. But this time I was ready. I forwarded the photo to my lawyer, along with all the other evidence of her stalking and harassment. Within days, he filed a motion to escalate the restraining order into criminal charges. When the police showed up at Laura's door with a warrant, it felt like poetic justice. For years, I had been the passive, forgiving husband, bending over backward to keep the peace. But now, I was done being her punching bag. As they took her away in handcuffs, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a lingering sense of disbelief that this was the same woman I had once loved. But I also felt something else: closure. For the first time in months, I knew that this chapter of my life was finally coming to an end. Or so I thought. I thought I'd reached the end of this nightmare. With Laura under a restraining order and facing criminal charges, I finally felt like I could breathe again. But as I had learned the hard way, Laura wasn't the type to let things go quietly. It started with a letter, not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter delivered to my house. The envelope had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. My stomach dropped as I unfolded the paper and read the first line. "You think you've won, but you don't know the whole story." She went on to say that she had one final truth to share with me, something that would change how I saw everything. She didn't spell it out, but left a cryptic hint: "Ask Megan about the cabin." The cabin? My mind raced. Megan had been one of the few people in my corner through all of this. Why would Laura mention her? Was this another attempt to manipulate me? I decided to confront Megan directly. I called her and told her about the letter. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she finally spoke. "I didn't want to tell you this," she said, her voice shaky, "but I think you deserve to know." What she told me hit like a ton of bricks. Apparently, the cabin was a place Laura and Mark had been using as a private getaway during their affair. Megan had found out months ago, but hadn't told me because she didn't want to get involved. But that wasn't the shocking part. Megan revealed that Laura wasn't just cheating on me with Mark. She had had multiple affairs over the years, and the cabin had been her safe haven for all of them. "I thought you might already know," Megan said, her voice filled with guilt. "I had no idea," I replied, my voice hollow. I felt like a fool. All this time, I'd been fighting to expose her affair with Mark, thinking it was a singular betrayal, when in reality, it was just the tip of the iceberg. But Laura wasn't done yet. A few days later, I received another letter. This time, it included photos, grainy but clear enough to recognize the people in them. There was Laura with not just Mark, but two other men I didn't know, all in compromising positions. The timestamps on the photos went back years, to times when I thought our marriage had been rock solid. The final blow came in the form of a document tucked into the envelope. It was a letter from her lawyer, threatening to countersue me for emotional distress if I pursued the criminal charges against her. It was a desperate move, but it showed just how far she was willing to go. I took everything, every letter, every photo, every piece of evidence, and handed it to my lawyer. "Make sure she doesn't get away with this," I said, my voice firm. The next court hearing was brutal. Laura's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim of my supposed vindictive campaign, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The judge not only upheld the restraining order, but also added additional penalties for her ongoing harassment. As I left the courthouse, I felt a sense of finality. Laura had thrown everything she had at me, but I had survived. That night, I sat alone in my house, thinking about everything that had happened. Laura's betrayal, her cruelty, her lies. It had all left scars that I knew would take years to heal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't the man she had tried to make me believe I was. I wasn't weak, pathetic, or powerless. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. As for Laura, I don't know what her future holds, and frankly, I don't care. She's out of my life for good, and that's all that matters. I'm not sure what comes next, but one thing is certain: I'm finally free.